Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Aiming Arrows podcast. My name is Andre Sampson, and I'm here with my awesome co host, Morgan Buchek.
Morgan Buchek here.
Yes, and so we are excited to continue with season 2 of the Aiming Arrows podcast. A little bit about us. I'm married to my amazing wife, Sonia. I have a 5-year-old Sam, a 3, almost 4-year-old Everly, and then a 1.5-year-old named Joshua.
Wow, I cannot believe he's already 1.5.
Wasn't
he born like last month?
I know, it feels so fast.
So fast. So Morgan Buchek, I have married to Brian. We've got 5 kids, ages 16 down to 8. I got to think of all their names and ages right now. But anyway, 3 boys, 2 girls. So that's the stage we're in right now. I'm about to have 3 teenagers in the home. As of Thursday, I'll have 3. So my middle child will turn 13. Please.
Yes. Okay. And then also we're so excited because we have our return guest on the show, Millye Hale, joining us.
I'm so glad to be with y'all again. I guess I'll tell about my family. I'm married to Blaine. I have 3 kids and 1 son-in-law, 1 daughter-in-law, and a grandbaby. So that's the fun. That's the highlight.
How old's your grandbaby?
She is 8 months.
Oh, exciting.
I know. So fun. So I'm getting to do this all over again. But, it's fun.
Oh,
I'm excited about it.
Okay, well, before we get into it, Millye, I would love for you to tell us a funny story. I'm thinking of one in particular that I've heard over the years that has to do with clothing on the front yard.
Well, we'll talk about this a little bit as we get further into our discussion about the home. But Sally, I was such a perfectionist. And Sally was probably in the 2nd grade, and she would always leave her underwear which she'll be glad I'm saying that, but she would just step out of her clothes and leave them on the floor. And I told her one day, I said, Sally, I'm going to do something with those if you don't put them, because we didn't really have a dirty clothes hamper, so we just put them at the top of the stairs and then I'd take everything down. Well, my husband and Sally had gone to church and I was home with Blaine, who was sick. He was probably about 3. And I saw the underwear, the dirty clothes sitting out there, and I thought, okay, I've got to do something with them. So I ran out, and there was this big branch that hung out over our street, and I ran out, and I hung the underwear in that branch on the tree.
Oh,
and so it was right over the street. And so I knew they were about to be home, and so they pull up. Sally sees her underwear in the tree, and I see her step on my husband, the ledge of his car, and she reaches up and grabs it. And I am looking out the front window with great anticipation about she is going to think this is funny.
Huge smile on your face.
Yeah, huge.
Sure.
I was like, I could not wait, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, she comes in, she's crying. She's like, Mom, I can't believe you did that. My husband's like, what is going on? I was like, oh my gosh. And so I said, obviously my funny bone is not your funny bone. And my daughter, I'll never forget, she looked at me in her little 2nd grade, sweet little voice, and she said, Mom, I may not be a clean freak like you, but there's a lot of other really good things about me.
Wow.
And so I said to myself, okay, from now on, I'm going to look for all the great things in her, because she wasn't wired like I was, which we'll talk about perfectionism. But the next day, I went out to go get the mail out of the mailbox, and my bra was hanging from the tree. So the neighbors think we're a bunch of weirdos.
I love it.
But
was that her idea? Did she go
I
do
guess
that?
so. I mean,
Brilliant,
they have
child.
never, well, I hope it was either her or Dad's, because
Yeah.
they did it. And I learned my lesson, though, about not expecting her. We kind of came up with a reasonably clean idea instead of a perfectionist,
Good one for family lore, though.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Okay,
good
so
one.
today we're going to be talking about AROMA, AROMA, an acronym for the aroma of our home. And Millye just has some incredible wisdom and insight. This is, I think, just such an important conversation to have. You guys may remember last season we had Jordan and Kyla Bryan on talking about the tone of the home, which very much feeds into the aroma of our home. And it's something we, I think, just consistently need to be checking ourselves in, checking our hearts. So let's jump in. All right, Millye, what is A?
What is A? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about this. It wasn't really my idea. When I became a believer and I had Sally, I got my first Bible when I was 28. And Sally was born when I was 31. And so this whole idea of cultivating a home was something that I really doubled down on, and really, so I found this book. It was called The Heritage. And it was just talking about, sometimes some people are gifted a beaded wedding gown for a spiritual legacy, and some people got a box of rags. And so how
Yeah.
do you take whatever you've got and make it into something special? And so the aroma was just the affection, the respect, the order, the merriment, and the affirmation.
Say that one more time.
The affection,
Uh-huh.
respect,
Okay.
order, merriment, and affirmation.
Love it.
And then it would give you ideas on how you, and I call it cultivate because the word cultivate means helping something reach its full potential. And
That's
so,
good.
how do you consider, each one of these ideas? And they would have suggestions, and I just kind of took it to heart. And so it became something that I really thought about.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that, and it reminds me of in 2 Corinthians 2:14, it talks about us being an aroma of Christ, as the Christians are to be that, and so I think it's great. It's really helpful. I would love to just jump right in, and let's start with the affection. How do you think about this aroma in your home, making that happen? It starts with affection. Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, when you think of affection, you think of intimacy, which is, hugging and kissing, but affection is so much more. When love is the noun, affection is the verb. It's the
Mm.
action part of that. And so
Mm,
you try to find ways. I know we had mentioned something about the five love languages. Well, I've always kind of, parents, that book was very popular when my kids were little. And so a lot of parents would read that book and try to figure out what each one of their children was so that they would make sure and meet their needs, whether it be acts of service or words of affirmation. And I always caution parents, don't box your kids in. If you went to the symphony, would you want to just hear the flutes? You want to hear the beautiful, mesh of all the instruments. And so affection can be little bitty things like sitting by your child when they're watching a movie, or sitting on the couch, or coming up behind them when they're doing their homework, playing with their hair, touching them on the shoulder. It can just be putting something on their pillow at night, like a note or a note in their lunchbox. I mean, there's so many ways that you can show affection for your kids without, just a kiss or just a hug.
So what if you're not naturally bent towards being affectionate? I would love to be a more naturally affectionate mother, but I just feel like I honestly just kind of forget, and so which is terrible. But what would you? Am I off the hook?
No, I think when you're no, you're
Okay,
not off
I'm
the
just
hook.
kidding.
But I think you've just got to realize, we're talking about a relationship. And so sometimes that's just being a very active listener,
Mm,
taking time. We're so distracted these days. It's really about taking the time to look your children in the eye. If they come in, if they come in and you're in the kitchen making dinner and they're asking a question, make a point of turning around, looking in their little faces for 5 seconds, and then decide if you're too busy to engage with them. Most of the
that's
time,
good.
when we look at their little faces, we're so wanting to be a part of whatever they need from us. We want to meet those needs. So I think affection, it can be so many little things. I know my next door neighbor, who was a mentor of mine, she's in her 80s now, and she's the one that came up with the rooting and grounding. She told me one time, well, her daughter she did the love bite. I think she was the original, prayer mom. She had a group of moms that always got together and prayed for her children. She had 5 children as well, but she would take a bite out of her children's sandwich every day when she packed their lunches. And one day her daughter, Melanie, said, Mom, why is there always a bite out of my sandwich? She goes, well, that's called the love bite. I was praying for you today. So I kind of started
My
implementing
kids
that. And
would
then when I moved
hate
from a
me.
size,
I did not.
this to a size this, I thought, no more love bites. Can't do that anymore. I'm
okay.
still praying for y'all, but I'm no more love bites. But
So how does that? I feel like affection is really easy when they're cute and adorable, and you're picking them up all the time, and you're just like, oh, I just snuggle.
They're
But
squishy. Why not
they're
squish
so
them? Yeah, that's how I
squishy.
feel
They're
right
so
now.
cute. But I've got a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy, and like, so what does that look like, especially for boys as they morph as they get older?
well, I know for my son, when he would come in from school or whatever, the best way to a boy is is through a stomach
Food.
and
Absolutely.
food. And so,
1000% agree.
if they know, well, okay, but if they like chips and hot sauce or cheese dip, or you tend to to make those type of snacks available,
Yep.
but you have them on the on the kitchen countertop, and then when they come in, they'll sit and chat with you. And I think if in the
Good.
beginning you cultivate that relationship, like my son and I mean, he would probably never admit this. I was telling his wife the other day, but I had drop off and they would all have to go. So I dropped one child off at elementary school, and then Blaine was in junior high. And he probably he would not admit this, but we held hands the whole way to school. And people used to
So
tell me, it was
sweet.
so sweet. And then we would have like 20 minutes, and I hate to say this, but we would do an over and under on how many boys we thought were going to have on cargo shorts. It would sound so stupid, but we would sit there and say, okay, it's
fun.
5. And then whoever won got to pick the one. We always got one Sonic drink after school. So, and all shared. So whoever won got to pick the drink. But I mean, it's just figuring out
Right.
some fun things
Yeah.
that conversations.
Yep.
I mean, all those deposits add up.
Mm.
If you don't, you're going to be spiritually bankrupt
Yeah.
if you don't make those deposits when your kids are little, with conversations and laughter and all the fun.
Yes.
And so it's just for boys, don't buy the lie that says, oh, all they're going to do is grunt when they get to that age. You keep expecting the best of them. Set the bar high and expect your kids to be hurdlers. I just always
good.
expected my kids to be hurdlers, not doing the limbo. I would say, nope, we're not doing the limbo. And so I just think it's important to make those deposits.
That's amazing. I want to remember those.
Yeah,
Set the bar high. Expect your kids to be hurdlers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we're not doing the limbo.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well,
No, you can do it.
yeah,
No,
you
I'm
can.
a big believer
I mean,
in
I
that.
would ask my son, he got a -10 for handwriting, and he didn't really have the greatest handwriting once he
boys.
started cursive. Well, it was really good when he was printing. I thought, he's not going to be a doctor. But then we got to cursive. I was like, okay, he could very well be a doctor. But he got -10, and I was kind of a little bit upset with the teacher because she misspelled his name. She put Blaine Hall instead of Blaine Hale. So I could have just undermined the teacher and said, she doesn't even know how to spell your name, because it was a substitute teacher. But when he got out for that next day, I said, Blaine, handwriting is important. And are you going to be a hurdler, or are you going to do the limbo? He goes, I'm going to be a hurdler. And so he roared off to school.
Man, I love that.
That's great.
But it's good to think about that.
I think the other question I asked there, so I think it's good to talk about the affection. You said you've got to make the deposits when they're young. What if we didn't? I think that's a real situation we've got to think through. Is a lot of people listening to this podcast at different stages of life or different stages of coming to know Christ. And so if you're sitting there in a situation going, we haven't done this, affection hasn't marked our home, and I want it to, is it too late for us? How do we start? What do we do?
Absolutely. That would be buying the lie. Absolutely not. Today is the day that I would push the restart button. Joel 2:25 says that the Lord will restore what the locusts have eaten. I have a lot of parents. I do this marble analogy where I have the 5 big marbles, because I think the first 5 years is the most important. And then I have, for 18 years, I have the rest. And every year on their birthday, you take out a marble. And so parents would come up to me and go, oh my gosh, I didn't do that in the first 5 years. And I'm like, honey, start with your big marbles today.
There you go.
If you have 7 years left, then you've got 5 big marbles and 2 left. And the problem is, it's called, and I've said this before, it's called parenting for a reason. And we're the parent. And if we change, the children follow.
Yeah.
And so we've just got to pray about it, asking the Lord that we want to change, and He's faithful. I mean, He is very, very faithful.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite proverbs. It says a righteous man falls 7 times but gets back up again. And it's like we just can't ever think, well, I never have, so I'm just never going to. It's like we're always falling off the bandwagon on something. Like even what we're going to talk about today is probably something I'm going to need to refresh myself on every 6 months or so, if not more frequently. And so I feel like that's the case with every good thing. It's why we need to be in God's word every day. Just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. And really, Morgan, God's word is so repetitious.
Yeah.
It's just like our kids. They want to hear the same book over and over and over again. They're repetitious. We need to be repetitious. We need to keep going back to the same old truths. We're going to fall. We're going to fall down, but get back up. That's what the restart button is for, is to push it, forgetting what is behind. There's truth there, and looking to what is ahead.
Okay. So AROMA the home. First one is affection. And that is, man, show affection to one another. Have your home, have your relationships in the home with your family be marked by affection. Start young. It's never too late to hit the reset button and keep going, but start young if you can. Invest in those, and also really importantly, affection doesn't have to look the same way for every person and every kid. But it is important to be creative in how we show that, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so the next one is respect. So it's the
Sorry.
R in aroma is respect. Millye, what do you have for
Well,
us on respect?
Well, I'm telling you what, I've had the privilege lately of going into a lot of homes, and I am amazed that parents don't hear the tone of voice from which their children talk to them. And I'm always like, oh my gosh. I mean, I just interrupt right there because respect is the heartbeat of the home. And just like a heart, if you have any blockage, then you die. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so, sibling to sibling, parent to parent, sibling to parent, parent to sibling, parent to child, it's all got to be flowing well. And respect is a huge part of that. I think that's probably the number one thing that we need to work on is just the respect. I mean, it was very, very important to me that my children were respectful of each other. And I held that. I had a rule in my house that was zero tolerance for disrespect.
Mm.
And I think you have to ask. I used to pray Psalm 119:18 says, open my eyes so that I may see the wonderful things in your law. And when I didn't know a
Yes.
lot about God's word, I would always pray, open my eyes so that I will see the wonderful things in your law. And when my son became about 12, I started praying, open my ears so that I will hear the heart from which he says everything to me.
Mm.
Because sometimes, that wasn't the verse, but I changed it to accommodate the season of life that I was in, because I wanted the Lord to remind me that that's not acceptable, and it doesn't build into the relationship that we're going to need to go into those junior high and high school years. And so I think you've just got to really listen for it, but it's so important. We had a rule in our house that was just we fight for each other, not against each other.
Yep.
And so many things in the home, so many lessons you're teaching,
Oh, yeah.
about
Constant.
how to treat each other, how to share, how to work together as a team. It's so,
absolutely.
you've just really got to really have that as your goal, not your goal even, but just a rule's a
Standard.
rule. Yeah, standard.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
It's funny. So I may have shared this before. I can't remember. But I was with my 10-year-old the other day, and he was saying something like, "Yeah" or "Okay," and I kind of just was like, I didn't really think anything of it, and suddenly it hit me. It was like, if I had somebody else standing in the kitchen right here listening to how he just talked to me, they would be like, "Oh no, he didn't. Oh, are you really going to take that? Are you really, And so, but it was one of those where by myself, I just got a little tone deaf. And so it's interesting how things that I didn't think I would tolerate before, and you're all ready to go with parenting. I just suddenly, it's like my standard can slip sometimes. And so it kind of helped going from the outside looking in. Is this acceptable? No, it is not.
Yeah.
But I do have a positive. So this is, I think I probably learned this from you. So my 14-year-old sometimes can talk to his siblings. All my older siblings can talk disrespectfully to the younger siblings, where they say, "Hey, where's the measuring cup?" "Well, it's where it always is," or whatever. I go, "Hey, let's try again. There's about 100 other different ways you could have said that without attitude. How about it's in the cupboard over there," just like that, And so I think providing them an example, which I learned from you, a different way of saying it that is not end with the nonverbal "you idiot," basically, like where hey, you can say that in an absolutely normal, respectful tone,
Yes.
where you are not putting him down.
Yeah.
So.
I think the question I have too is like how much of this is it a really hill to die on? I think that is what I'm trying to figure out, because there's a lot of things we can fight for, and sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, parenting can be exhausting, and so it can feel like, man, I'm correcting on this, and my two oldest, which are very young, are starting to get to the stage where they will just bicker, and they don't even make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is like a 5-year-old and 4-year-old arguing with each other. It means nothing. They're just not even. They're barely communicating with each other. They're just arguing, and so how much do I police that? How much is it worth investing in? Are there times you go, I don't need a yes sir or a no ma'am or any of those things? Like it's just not. That's not the hill to die on. Is that a right way to look at it?
Well, I mean, in my home, that was a hill to die on. I mean, I had 3 things that Blaine and I agreed that we were going to hold our kids' feet to the fire, and it was disrespect, disobedience, and dishonesty. And we expected manners. I think respect starts with manners, and I'm just my whole thing. My kids say one thing I said the most in our home was people notice. And my kids, they would say that that's the one thing that when they got to college, they really noticed that people do notice.
Mm.
And I just think it's really important. I love the verse I kind of shared with you all about Proverbs 18:16. It just said, a gift opens the way for the giver and ushers him into the presence of greatness. People notice good manners. And I think it's just a sign of respect. And it says in Romans 12:10, outdo one another in respect. If you respect your children with, they'd say, can I have more orange juice? And I'd always say, may I? And they'd go, may I please?
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, when they were just little bitty, I would like act like a snail. Like I would walk across the kitchen, very, very slow. And they'd go, may I please? And then I would run and get it and I'd fill it up. And I may even get a frosted mug, out of the freezer, to give them more orange juice. But so when their kids would come over and they go, can I have some more pancakes? And I'd start and they'd go, say, please, ask my mom, please. And then when I'd run around, they'd go, can I have some more milk, please? They would catch on quickly.
It's good.
But
So
it was fun. It made it fun.
Yeah.
And so when you expect good manners, and when we would be at Target and I would see a child, say to their mom, I'd say, oh, I love your dress. And some little girl would say, thank you. I'd say, oh my gosh, I'm a mom that loves good manners.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids would hear that. And so I still to this day, if I'm somewhere and I see a sibling treating a sibling kindly, I make a point to stop and say something. I have the time today to be looking around and noticing when people are doing the right thing. And I just think it's, I think I shared last time, maybe I was going into racetrack and there was a dad making his son hold the door for the daughter. And
Yep.
I just got the benefit of walking through and I went on and on. I was like, oh man, what a blessing. I was waiting for a gentleman. And the dad was like going, thank you so much. And I mean, I went over to even say, thank you again. I mean, it's just, we've got to be noticing these things. Our kids notice when we highlight it with other people.
I knew a family that would pay their boys anytime they got a compliment about their manners. So if I got a text from one time, I texted them and said, they were so polite. I love the Mrs. Buchek. And I'll tell my kids, I'm like, look, this kid could just be trouble. But he comes to the front door and he says, yes, Mrs. Buchek, no, Mrs. Buchek, yes, ma'am. I think he's the greatest kid ever.
Yeah. And there's tip-offs that you don't. When my kids would get a compliment, I'd go, that is so thoughtful. Or I'd say something about, oh my gosh, that's the nicest compliment. And they'd go, thank you, or, did you have fun with your friend today? And they go, yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mrs. Smith, for having me over. Yeah. I kind of had tip-off phrases for my kids to understand that, we just held that very important. When they went to restaurants, when they were 3, whatever, they began to order for themselves. I wanted to teach them how to talk to adults and respect. If they wanted more ketchup, they had to go up and ask for it and look the person in the eye. And that takes a while to cultivate that. But it really is about holding their feet to the fire. Yeah. People appreciate good manners.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's been fun to have that conversation with our kiddos, and one of the ways that we've done that is starting to tell them about just taking it back to the image of God. Of it starts in our home of like, hey, first of all, you're not going to talk to your mama like that, and you're not going to talk to my wife like that, and also that's God's daughter, and so we always try to bring it back there as much as we can. Is this is your sister, this is your best friend, we can't talk to her like that, and also, hey, God made her and loves her, right? And then we talk about that, and so I think just bringing it back to who do we show manners to. People who are made in God's image.
Right.
Who's made in God's image?
And it starts in our home. I mean, we've got to see ourselves as Team Hale, Team Samson, Team Buchek. You've got to see yourself as a team, and you're all working together for the same goal. I think in Deuteronomy, that was the very first verse I ever memorized in Deuteronomy 6, that, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give to you today, it's a gift, are to be upon your heart. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, walk on the road, lie down, get up. We've got the time to do, that's 24/7. We've got the time to cultivate the aroma of our homes. That's where it all happens. Our homes today, I would say this, have got to be a refueling station. Our families are getting beat up outside the home. And so we've got to make sure when they come in, they know what to expect. It's
Yeah.
got to be predictable.
Yep. And that brings us right kind of to our next one. So we had affection, we had respect, and then the next one is order. You talked a little bit about how the home needs to be a refueling station, somewhat predictable. How does order play itself out in our homes?
Well, I mean, I would say that order, the opposite of order is chaos. And I would just say, I always told myself, and, I'm not saying this is a rule for everybody, but I always said love grows best in small houses. Blaine and I lived for the first 9 years of our marriage, and we had 2 kids there in a 2-bedroom townhouse. And I realized real quick that I had a lot of perfectionism in me, and it wasn't going to be good. The bigger the house I had, the more it was going to distract me from the real, you can't think survival mode. You've got to think kingdom minded, because we've got to, and everyone's different. So I'm not saying you need to sell your house and move to a smaller house, but I'm just saying for me, having less to manage,
Yes.
because, you think about it when you go out to a meal. Think about that feeling when you're stuffed. I always think about how my home feels when it's stuffed. It doesn't, it's just not a good feeling. And so for me, I had to really pare down and just have things orderly, because your kids need to see, they need to know where their soccer shoes go, because what happens if you kick your shoes off and you don't know where they are and you've got soccer practice the next day, then you're late for soccer practice. And then that leans into disrespect. You're disrespecting your team and the coach by showing up late because you couldn't find your soccer shoes. And it creates an environment of getting snappy and
Yes,
short.
it does.
Yeah.
So true.
So that's,
Yeah.
it's just important. Order's important. That's the way God created the world, is with order.
Yep.
And so we need to take that into our homes.
There's a reason model homes sell. I always say.
Yeah.
There was a mom once who said it's important to put toys away every night in their orderly position so kids see that. And it's so true. I found that like when I had toys and chaos, when it was just left out, they were less likely to actually play with them again. It's like there's one thing where they make the mess themselves, but then when you go off and do the other thing, they've got to come back at some point and make order of it, and then they're more likely to know where things are, to have all the accessories. And I'd never thought about that as being just a kind of a developmental thing for kids.
Well, and I went over and worked with a girl that I've really mentored for the last 8 years, and her kids were doing the same thing. I mean, her house was a little bit chaotic. And so I kind of sat down with the kids and with this friend and said, "Hey, do you like to crawl into your bed at night?" And they were like, "Yeah, I like my bed to be, snuggly and warm." And I go, "Well, so do your toys." And everything has a home. And I think we evaluate things by, I went over with a mom that was, couldn't grasp the order part of it. Her mom was a hoarder. That was her default button. And so we went over and I said, everything, we're going to pick it up and we're going to look at it. And it's either going to be a burden or a blessing. And if it's a burden, you put it in a bag and take it to Goodwill. If it's a blessing, then you find a home for it. And that's just a good rule of thumb, just to kind of go through.
Sally Clarkson wrote a book called something about the home. It's escaping me right now.
It's a good
It's
one.
One of her best. It's a great one.
No, she's good.
But it was, I mean, she really went into a lot of detail on like, fresh flowers and candles and music. And sometimes they were things that were just really good reminders. So, I mean, what we do when Brian's off work at 5 o'clock, I light that candle and we put on John Barry radio from Pandora, and that's what I cook dinner to. And it just changes the atmosphere of them. When I haven't gotten to putting the music on, I feel it. I feel like I just feel a little bit more hurried. There's something about the music that's just relaxing, and it changes the aroma.
Okay, can I ask a weird question from the dad perspective here, because I realize I'm talking to two mamas, and then and I didn't prepare either of y'all for this question at all. So here we go. But just that reality of there are times where I've gotten Sonia like a decoration for the house, and she has put it up, and I have not noticed for over a month. And it's like one of the entire living room walls is this poster, and I had no idea that it was on the wall. And she's like, "Did you notice?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "How long has that been on the wall?" She's like, "For like 2 months, dude. Like, how do you not see it?" And so I think there are some guys or some dudes in general, people that are maybe wired in a way that's like, man, I don't really notice the sort of little details of the candles or the flower or some of those things. And so help as a dad,
Yeah.
or maybe as somebody that is wired in a way that won't notice things like that? How can and I want to do order. How can I add value there? Like, is there, like, give me some practical steps that I can take that I can add to the order of the home? Because this isn't, I want to be clear that this is, it may fall more on whoever's at home more to create the order of the home. But even if so for our situation, this is not for everybody, but Sonia's at home most of the time. She has a part-time job and I go to work full time. I'm still responsible and will give an account to the Lord for everything that happens in the home that he has entrusted me to. And so it's not my wife's responsibility and not my responsibility, her job, not mine. And it's our job.
Yeah.
She does the bulk of it because she's at home more. As the dad, as the father, how can I help and add value here?
Yeah, my main thought on that is just keep it in the forefront of your mind of how do I help Sonia? Because you don't follow her lead, and there, I think maybe you said it. It's if she's up cleaning or organizing, you're up. That's one of those where it's like, if it matters to her, follow that lead to go, hey, I'm gonna bless her and serve her because the truth of the matter is you also like a picked up home.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like, you may not be the one to initiate that, but you still value it. And so it's just supporting one another and helping it stay tidy.
Well, and I think too, the spirit of the home most often falls to the woman. That's the way the Lord wired us. And so, Blaine would never notice if I got some, unless he tripped over it. I mean, he would never notice something that I hung something different or I did something. I'm one of these that really goes around my home and I put up old pictures that I love. And of like, when Gracie was 2 or, and they're all throughout my house. And a lot of times, I mean, every room is kind of coordinated the same color. So I'll move the picture and the picture frame around just to kind of change up things. Mm-hmm. And it's just fun to go back and look at God's faithfulness. But I don't think that a man is their feet, unless that hurts Sonia's feelings. I think that, men are not going to be as observant on things like that than a wife. Yeah. I think you get a hall pass on that.
Okay. We have to notice.
But now up and cleaning, you have to get up and clean. Great. But our kids, we're a smells person. We love the candles. We love the I wash the clothes in Diva, the glamorous wash, which is a very expensive wash. But I mean, I wanted my kids, when we have a basket of blankets, they always smell good. My kids love the expectation. I just think when our kids pull up, and I've said this often about when my kids went off to college, I would say, what time are you going to be home? They'd say 2:00. At 1:45, I'd position myself right by the front door because I would start praying. I pray that they long to be inside. They know our home is predictable. And that's just important to know when they pull up that it's predictable. They can say, I know what goes on in those 4 walls. Because really, the only person that knows is the people that live there. And then, of course, the eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch over the wicked and the good. The Lord sees what's going on in our homes. And so we need to be mindful about what we're doing there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think, and this is a question that's not necessarily for us. I think Sonia and I have had good conversations about these, but is there an amount of order that's too much, that's too rigid, that we sort of permanently want your house to look like, a magazine or something like that that also makes it feel unlived in? And so how do you walk that balance between, hey, we want order, but we don't want, is there such a thing as too much order is I guess the question I'm asking. Is there such a thing as caring too much about how your home looks all the time?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I was telling Morgan, I mean, she's seen the picture. It's a picture that really changed me forever, but it was a Christmas card that I took when Gracie was 9 months old. So I had, they're 7 years apart. Sally was 7, Blaine was 4, 3, somewhere around there. And then Gracie was almost a year. And I went to take the picture by myself. Gracie was screaming her head off. But the look on, I only got 2 pictures. I only snapped 2 pictures because then I fell and I had to limp to the car. Anyways, the moral of the story is I developed the pictures and my husband said, man, that's our Christmas card this year. And I said, I'm not sending that. If you could see the look on my older 2 kids' faces, it was like, this isn't going well. Mom is a perfectionist. And it changed me forever because I saw that picture. We did send it. It said, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with us. And we sent the card, but it really changed me. I ended up getting that picture blown up to like a 16 by 20 because I wanted to be reminded often that perfectionism is not the goal. You want to have that order and have that, but you don't want to take it to that extreme because your kids notice and it robs you of that
Joy.
good, joy and that time. If everything's got to be, the best and the perfect and so I kind of adopted at that point reasonably clean as far as my house goes. And and it's just it's a blessing to your family when you're not perfectionist.
Shoot for the stars, reach the moon. I feel like that kind of atmosphere, everybody's on edge.
Yeah,
everybody's walking on eggshells when it's like, oh, is mom gonna be mad? Oh, you left that out. Oh, make sure. Like I think the best idea is there's a time of day, especially when you have littles, and there's chaos all the time. Or you homeschool, your house is just usually kind of always messy. But you pick a time to clean up. You involve everybody. You put the music on. I used to do William Tell's Overture. My kids loved it, and we all did it together. And it was before Dad, got home from work. And that was our one time. And it was like I let it out of my mind before that because I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that kind of stress that spills over to my kids.
And that involves teamwork. I mean, we would always do, because of a friend of mine, that she would always do a 10-minute tidy. Just took 10 minutes. They'd all clean up. You'd set the timer. Everybody's running around as fast as they can. They're serving each other because sometimes you got to take up someone else's shoes. You got to do this. And it's just a blessing. And it's a blessing. And I think it's important. I'll say this real quick. You should sit down and talk to your spouse about it, because your spouse may say, I'd prefer you have a hot meal. I don't care if the house is cleaned up. And so you need to listen to your spouse. And because if you're trying to clean the house and you're frazzled and there's no hot meal and he says, I would prefer a hot meal, come up with what's important to y'all as a team,
It's great.
So.
Yep. Yeah, that's been, and it's been really fruitful. And Sonia and I have had those conversations because it's changed in different seasons too. I think just having little kids and babies and newborns and all that stuff. And so even just as I had asked y'all, how can I add value there? It's like Sonia does not want help from me in decorating our house. 100%. She's not like, I love your suggestions on the colors of the blankets. Like, I have no idea. But she was like, man, I'd be helpful if we can clean up the backyard so the kids can play in it. If you can go pick up all the dog poop. And so there's things that you can go, okay, I just have the conversation, be a team.
Yeah, for sure.
And recognize that, hey, order is something that we want to bring. And so I made I got the family calendar, and I'm the one that drilled it into the wall and put it on there. And Sonia's the one that draws the pictures and keeps track of it. And it's still my job to initiate it. So there's ways to do it.
Yeah.
I think, so moving on from order, so we had affection, respect, order, and now we're on to merriment. Those sometimes can feel like a hard switch to go from order to merriment. Tell me more about merriment. Why is that such an important part of the aroma of our home?
What do you think, Morgan?
Oh, I think it's the necessary ingredient. I mean, I think sometimes if you're thinking it's a hard switch, it's almost like because with order comes irritability, comes everybody's grumpy because we're trying to get the house in order before so-and-so comes over. And it doesn't have to be that way. And merriment is the icing, I think on the cake.
It's the sweetness. I mean, I work so much with parents and, have a book that I wrote for discipline. And it's, when you're talking about firm, fair, and follow through, if that's all you're focused on, then that's just strictly business. And you've got to have the fun. If you're looking at a pie graph and you have it divided into 4 sections, I think fun is the most important thing. And we just made a commitment, to lighten up and just have some laughter. That should be something that you hold your feet to the fire every day, just to create moments where you just laugh. Even if you're having a conversation with a child and maybe they think something they say is funny and it's not disrespectful, then give it a laugh. I mean, that makes them feel good. It makes them feel engaged. But I mean, laughter's an important part. Now, my kids all call me a wet blanket, but I can be fun at times.
You're so fun.
I mean, I know, but they don't. The other day, Gracie said they went to dinner and she was with both of her siblings and then, the husband and wife. And she said they were talking about who's the funniest person you know, and they all said Blaine, my husband. And I go, that is so rude. And they go, okay, Mom, we threw you a bone. We said you were funny at times. So, anyways, but I mean, it's just having fun in your home. I mean, it's just important. I mean, just laughing.
So important.
How do you? I guess it's a silly question to say, how do you do that? But I think sometimes as parents, we can get caught in it's easy for my 5-year-old to giggle and laugh at everything, but he doesn't have to pay the bills and work and go get dinner on the table. He's completely carefree. He has zero concerns. And so, yeah, of course he's laughing all the time. How do I flip that switch to find that sort of merriment when I've got stress and I've got worries and I've got all the other things I'm sort of that are holding me back from just cutting up and telling knock knock jokes with a 5-year-old?
I think it's just really allowing yourself the freedom to lighten up, not to take life so seriously. I know there's the pressures of life, but in your home, it's sweet. And that's why I think it's very important. Like when we lived in a 2-bedroom house, I mean, we would just put on the music and we would dance, and my kids still remember those times of just having fun. We also, it's amazing how, my in-laws love the Lord so much. And they just didn't have the stresses of the world because they just love the Lord. And so you just saw that it was always fun. Like we would do things like at Thanksgiving, we made a pact. We had a camera, a video camera, and we decided that everybody had to dance independently to their seat, walk in. And so it's silly to look back at those things, but I mean, you can make it fun if you really try. I think everybody has a funny bone. You just got to find it,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you told a story about something about when the kid wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. What do you do?
Well, I mean, if they were little, I'd say, okay, I'd scoop them up and go put them back in bed and go, you got to get out on the other side. Or, I mean, literally, if they had a bad attitude, I would go over to the back door, open the back door, and just have them throw it out. Or roll down the window, and it'd be freezing like today, or like the, freezing day. And we just roll down the window and have them throw that bad attitude out because
I love it.
there's just no room for that. But that goes the same for me too. I'm sure they would have loved to have rolled my window down sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I have to acknowledge that. And I think that's just part of the Christian perspective. It's like
Yes.
not taking things too seriously.
Yeah.
Not especially like just things with your children. Like not figuring out what things to take seriously and what things not to. I think is just so important. Because parenting is. You're going to expect them to sin. You're going to expect them to make mistakes. And so it's like we talked about this before, but not needing to be personally offended.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Okay, so we got affection, respect, order, and merriment. And then the last part of aroma is affirmation. Okay, so help me understand affirmation. What does it look like to do that in the home with your kids, in your family?
For me, it was really catching my kids doing something right, catching them doing something good, making them feel like, I mean, I remember my poor Sally, she's 31 now, but it seemed like forever. She would try out for everything and she would never get it. And I see the line of work that she's in now is she's a Christian counselor for young children. And I always say, of all the people that I would want to come back as, I would want to come back as Sally. She's the most joyful person you ever want. I've never, ever, except when I put her underwear out in the tree, seen her in a bad mood. I think that's the only time. Maybe that was the defining moment but she's just so joyful in who she is. And I think that, just recognizing that it's okay if your kids don't make a certain team, and it's okay. We want our kids to do their best, not be the best. And I would just make a plug for parents. Don't wish your kids to be in the quote unquote popular group. I never really wanted to see my kids be in the quote unquote popular group because there's a lot of things that aren't good that are going on there. And that's why you've got to make your homes and your family so much fun and appealing, because as your kids get older, my kids preferred, we had like traditions. I mentioned earlier just the fact that we would go to the state fair every year. And when Sally got to be 13, that was just a tradition. And she didn't want to go. We were going to go. I said, oh, we're going to the fair on Tuesday night. She goes, oh, Mom, I'm going with my friends. And I said, no, you're not. You're going as a family with us. And she goes, Mom, I'm going with my friends. I said, Sally, it's a tradition, you're going. And so she had her arms crossed and her looking out the window the whole way down there. And we went straight to the rides. And I said, let's go to the Crazy Mouse, because I knew she loved to be on that. And literally her and her dad did the roller coaster, the Crazy Mouse, and they snapped a picture at the top. Sally's hands are in the air, face is just full of laughter and smiles. And so when we got off, they kind of ushered us over to this booth and they said, would you like to buy one of these pictures? And it was a picture of Sally and her dad at the top of the deal, and laughter and having so much fun. And I said, yes, I'll have that one right there in an 8x10. Not for Sally, but for me, to remind me, because it would have been real easy for me to say, oh, you want to go with your friends, just go with your friends. But it reminded me that I've got to hold firm and fast to keeping our family together. One thing I would say in the aroma of the home too is make sure you have a commitment to family dinners. It doesn't
Yes.
matter what you're serving. I said often, if I'd had a really bad day, I would call Blaine on his cell phone and say, hey, on your way home, swing by and get a hot and ready. And I tell young moms, I've said it at different ministries or with moms and dads, I said, I was always hopeful that there was a good connection, because if he just heard hot and ready, he might show up without the pizza. He might show up without the pizza, and then we wouldn't have anything for dinner.
Your
But
definition there.
there is a verse in Proverbs that just says that it's better to serve a small serving of vegetables with love than the fatted calf with hatred.
Mhm.
And I would just encourage you. Your kids would prefer you serve peanut butter, make your own PBJ, than sit down with a fatted calf and a meal that you're stressed out about. And that's again, the dinner time we committed, and my kids do not miss dinner. I mean, still to this day, I mean, if I say, hey, do y'all want to come over for dinner? They call me and say, Mom, can we come over for dinner?
Mm.
Can we ask them? Can we, and so it's a fun time to reconnect and make those deposits. Still, even though my kids are older, I mean, it's important.
That's a couple years ago. I started to notice, just as the older kids have more evening activities and sports, I found that like our dinner time was just not consistent. It wasn't happening, and then I felt like I just got convicted by the Lord, and I found this book called The Table Experience by Debbie Titus, that some women in our body had done as a book club years before, but it just stuck in my mind, and I was like, I need to read that. And it was just the encouragement I needed to go, hey, family dinner at night matters. And once I started really making it a priority, and it was like, this is either going to happen at 5 or at 8:30, but we're all going to be here together, depending on all the chaos and activities. And we don't nail it 7 out of 7 nights a week, but as often as we can. And the kids love it. They are just like, what are we having for dinner? And is it dinner time? And it's like it's been fascinating to watch how much they truly love to gather all together. And those are great teaching opportunities, because you've got a captive audience. Mom's going to bring out something historical, and they're all going to groan, but they've got to listen, So anyway,
it's really important. I would say we used to, when my kids were little bitty, and like we were in different, like let's say Sally had soccer practice or somebody had a practice, my husband and I, or Blaine had a practice, Sally had a practice, I had one, he had the other, then we would always go to dinner, and we found ourselves at Taco Bueno a lot. And the catchphrase was, are we going to dirty or dirtier? Because there were two in our neighborhood. One was dirty, one was dirtier, and we knew where to go. And it was just, but we were committed to going, and we love to go to restaurants with a round table. I can tell you all the restaurants in Dallas with round tables, because
fun.
I really wanted to see everybody's pretty face. A round table is great. And we did table topics, and my kids are always like, oh, we've already done that one, but I'd dust them back off. So
that's good.
Yes, family dinners are so important, and part of this building the aroma of our home, and it's also a great opportunity to affirm one another around those dinner tables and have those conversations. And so, as we're talking about affirmation, how is there a right way and a wrong way to do that? Like, how do you think about, how do I affirm my kids? One of the things you said was noticing, like catching them doing something right. How do you do that? Are there other times that you have affirmed them that's been really helpful, that's been really impactful?
I think when you tuck your kids in bed at night, I always say, wake them up in a good mood and send them to bed in a good mood, as much as you can. And I know that, there's seasons that it's hard with bedtime, because I've gone over to a couple homes lately, and it's just having that holding their feet to the fire about, yes, it's good for them to go to bed anyways. I think whispering in their ear, a lot of times, I would say to my son or my daughter, of all the little boys in the world, of all the little girls, how did I get so lucky to get you? Sending them off with just some sweetness, just that when they're filled up when they go to bed, and not, understanding that if you've got to be somewhere at 8:30, wake them up in plenty of time to, really have those deposits and affirm them. And just, I think those low tide moments, anytime you can create those during the day. I had a dad that after he took my class recently, he said, oh my gosh, my wife was out of town all weekend. He goes, and I had an opportunity to tell each one of my 3 kids, of all the little boys, how did I get so lucky? How did God orchestrate you in our family? Or, I'm so blessed by your presence in our family. And I mean, we're talking 4-year-olds to 8-year-olds. And he said their hearts and just their facial expression, just beaming, being so filled up because the dad took the time, to say that. And I think at the dinner table, the highs, the lows, the woes, saying something about a child. I mean, whoa, how did you see God working today? Get these, rituals or traditions in your family that open up and spur on good conversation. It's opportunities. And if you got a message, if a mom called you and said, or a teacher called you and said, this happened, we've got to highlight that, and really talk about it, because when you talk about it and build up that one child, you've got other children that are listening and say, whoa, I've got a mom or a dad that notices, when and teachers that notice. That was one of the phrases we used all the time, where people notice. And anytime we got a compliment about our kids, we brought it to the dinner table and said, hey, Mrs. Smith noticed you helping your sister. I remember one time it was a birthday, and my son, or my youngest daughter, took cookies she would deliver them to a teacher. And so she went into my son's room, and my son jumped up and went over to hug his sister. And Miss Duncan said, you know what, Blaine, because you went over and addressed your sister that way, you get a 100 in the grade book or something. And Blaine came home and he was so excited because he's dyslexic.
Nice.
And so grades were important to him, but we had to wrestle with that. Well, it was a big boost, but it was just nice that the teacher noticed.
Yes.
I mean, and he, in front of all those friends, because we held firm and fast to respect, he felt okay about going and loving and building up his sister. And so I just think, it's just important to really affirm and just when people see something in your kids or in your family, to highlight that and really say something.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've kind of used as a filter when encouraging our kids and trying to affirm them is we try to affirm attributes more than accomplishments. Sports is a great example of that, of just, I'm not going to say I love that you scored a goal. I'm going to say I love that you didn't give up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I love that we won the game. I'm going to say I love that you're such a team player. And so we just, affirming the right things, I think, really matters.
Yeah.
Love it.
There is a little bit, though, where I think culturally there can be a trend of, and I've experienced this being a school teacher, is there can be times where it's like, hey, it's right to affirm your kids, but it's not okay to tell them that they're perfect and the world revolves around them.
Exactly.
And so how do we strike that balance of, hey, I want to affirm them, want them to know that I love them and I think the world of them, and also not affirm them so much that we get them convinced that they're right, everybody else is wrong, and they're the most special person in the world revolves around them. How do we do that?
Yeah, exactly. It's
Where's
like,
the line?
do you preach your kid all the time? Like, don't forget the heart is deceitful and wicked above all things, Don't forget you're a sinner in need of a savior.
Yeah. How do you strike that
Think about
balance
that,
between affirming them and making them think that the world revolves around them?
Right.
I think you highlighted the best part about it was just to really be a person that notices virtuous behavior. Virtuous behavior, teaching your kids conscientious. I think to be conscientious, I think it's very important to make a list of all the attributes, whatever, flexibility, not being self-centered, thinking of others, figure out what you want to teach and train in your kids and double down, because, that time is fleeting. You get to a certain age, and the time is fleeting.
Yeah.
It gets short. Your window gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And if you're not making all those deposits, then you're going to be spiritually bankrupt. You're not going to be able to cash those checks when they get in junior high and high school because you haven't made the deposits. So I would just say, highlight the things that you want to see in them. When you see those things, just the verbiage that you used, I think is so important, what you're looking at. It's kingdom-minded.
Yes.
It's staying kingdom-minded.
Kingdom-minded affirmation, not the worldly affirmation that's always
Yes.
about building up your self-esteem and telling you to love yourself first and all the kind of mantras that make you crazy.
Now the world highlights fame. It's all about being number one, being the best, everybody gets a trophy. All the things. And so if you don't want to teach and train that, then you've got to do a really good job of focused on what you're trying to teach and train.
Yeah.
And
so figure out what are the attributes that are important to you. I'll just say, parents, that's a great conversation to have with your spouse, with your community group, and process those. You can come up with those. If you want a cheat sheet, you can go on the City Bridge Kids website. We have 36 godly character traits. There are 36 great things to affirm your kids in, just to make it easy for you. You can come up with your own list if you'd like.
Yeah.
I personally just use that list because it's
awesome.
Easy. I don't have to come up with new stuff.
It's awesome.
Yep. Okay. Millye, thank you so much. This has been really helpful in just helping us understand very practically and tangibly how we set the aroma of our home. Any sort of closing comments if you're going, man, parents have listened to this. If they heard nothing else, you want them to hear this, what would that be?
I think just start by doing one thing. Just
Mhm.
start. They do, like I've said before, they call it parenting for a reason. So many times I'll go into the home and the parent wants me to fix the child. And I'm like, oh, all I want to do is tweak the parent. Because
Mm,
when the parent changes, when you find something that you want to do differently and you pray about it and you have accountability, it's amazing how the child follows. And so I would just say pick one thing that you want to, whether it's order or whether it's, I said that I went into that one home where the girl was, her default button was hoarding because that's what her mom was. And I mean, you walked in her home and you couldn't even see the floor.
Mhm.
There was so much stuff. I mean, trash, this, that. And so myself and another mom, we went in and just cleared the whole room out and just, I mean, I think she sent me a video later that night and the dog was laying on the couch. I don't even think the dog knew there was a couch there. I mean, there was just so much stuff. But the husband came home and he said he couldn't believe it. He's like, holy snipes, what happened to our house?
Mm.
And so after they'd had about 2 weeks, she texted me and said, my husband came in last night and said, do you think we can get our whole house to look like this? And so there's just a part of that. This is our home. We're bringing our children. We want to be, I mean, I always said to myself, I want to be the kids, I want to be the home my kids want to come to. Most people say I want to be the kid, I want to be the home all the kids want to come to. I just wanted my kids to feel loved and supported and encouraged and, in our home. And so I just think, start small. Don't think you got to do everything today, but I mean just that one little effort. And then as you start getting some traction, it does make a difference.
It's great.
that's
Thank you
awesome.
so much.
Yep.
All right,
Love it.
thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right.
We hope this has been a blessing for you, and we'll catch you next time on the Aiming Arrows podcast.
Yep.